My ex-wife found out about my money 3 days before I did. That's the part that still keeps me up at night. The call came from a number I didn't know. "Check your money," the man said. "She's asking about you." Then he hung up. I didn't say a word back. Didn't need to. 3 years of silence from Rachel, and suddenly her name was moving through people I hadn't talked to in months. I've learned something running a gym for 20 years. When good things happen to you, somebody always comes looking. I just didn't expect it to be her. I'm 48. I run a gym in Youngstown, Ohio. Boxing coach. Same morning routine since before the divorce. Eggs, black coffee, 20 minutes on the bag before sunrise. I do not scare easy. That call scared me. A few months earlier, I put money into a young fighter named Danny Ruiz. Good hands, better heart. Kid who walked 2 miles to the gym the day his car broke down and never once mentioned it, like asking for a ride was a bigger loss of face than the 2 miles themselves. I'd seen 100 kids come through that gym with faster hands than Danny's. What Danny had was rarer. He showed up angry at himself instead of at the world, which is the only kind of anger that actually builds a fighter instead of wasting him. I put my own money behind him when nobody else in this town would, took a piece of his purses in exchange for training and management, and told myself it was business. It wasn't only business. I don't do anything halfway. Not fighters, not marriages, not grudges. He won big in Columbus. 6th round, a body shot that folded a man who outweighed him by 9 pounds, and I remember standing at ringside watching Danny's face while the referee counted, and it wasn't joy on it, it was relief. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for months, and somebody had finally let him set it down. My cut came back at $459,233. I didn't throw a party. I paid off the gym mortgage, fixed the roof, went back to teaching jabs the next morning like nothing happened. That's who I am. But somebody found out, and they found out before I even had the number in front of me on paper. That part bothered me more than anything else. My contract with the promoter had a purse figure everyone in the sport already knew. That's public. Fighters, reporters, the guys at the diner, all of them could do that math the second Danny's hand got raised in Columbus. But my number wasn't just the purse. There was a side agreement, a quiet cut of the pay-per-view buy rate the promoter didn't put in writing, plus a knockout bonus he'd promised me over a handshake 2 years back when I first sent him a fighter worth building around. Nobody outside that room had any business knowing that figure existed, let alone knowing it down to the dollar. Somebody had heard it from someone who'd heard it from someone. That's how these things travel in club fight circles, through bars, through cornermen who drink too much after a win, through the kind of loose talk that happens when a man wants to sound like he's got connections he doesn't really have. I'd seen it happen to other trainers before and always figured I was careful enough to avoid it. Careful enough, it turned out, wasn't the same as invisible, and that somebody led straight back to my ex-wife. Rachel left me for a man named Blake almost 3 years ago. I never saw it coming, and that still eats at me more than the divorce itself. Here's the truth. While my marriage was quietly falling apart, I was busy keeping another man alive, a fighter named Marcus. Depression, drinking. Nights I sat on his couch until sunrise because I was scared of what he might do alone and never once thought to ask myself what all those nights were costing me at home. I got the call at 11 that night, barely coherent, talking about how nobody would notice if he was gone. I drove 40 minutes in my pajama pants. I sat with him until the sun came up. I did that more times than I can count that year. I saved him. I lost her. She never told me she was unhappy. She just found somewhere else to feel alive. That week, small things started catching my attention. Things I would have let go before. On their own, none of them would have meant anything. A gym like mine gets strangers wandering through all the time. Fight fans, parents scouting programs for their kids, guys just killing an afternoon. I've never been the type to read menace into every unfamiliar face that walks past my window. But that week, something in me stayed alert a beat longer than usual, the way you notice a sound in your own house that's slightly off from every other night. Danny mentioned a guy at the diner asking about his fight record. Casual, he said. Just a fan. I did not think it was just a fan. A regular at the gym said somebody called the front desk asking what time I usually opened. Wouldn't leave a name. Said he'd call back and never did. My neighbor mentioned a gray sedan parked near the gym 2 nights running. Nobody he recognized. Out-of-state plates, he thought, though he couldn't say for sure in the dark. I filed all of it away. Quiet. Patient. The way I do everything. I've been running a business long enough to know that when 3 strange things happen in 1 week, they are never 3 separate things. The caller was Susan, old business partner, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. We met for coffee, face to face, some things you don't say over a phone line. She picked a table in the back corner of the diner, away from the window, the kind of spot you choose when you don't want to be seen talking to somebody. She kept glancing at the door, like she expected someone to catch her talking to me. "You always take care of everybody else first," she said. "Somebody should be watching your back for once." I laughed it off. Looking back, she already saw something I wasn't ready to admit was possible. She'd overheard 2 men at another gym talking about betting lines. On my fighters, my name came up. Then Rachel's name came up right beside it. "It's not a coincidence," she said. "I just thought you should hear it from me first." I thanked her. I didn't tell her how much that sentence was already tearing through my chest. 3 days later, a buddy who runs a small book out of his cousin's bar flagged something for me. Somebody had been placing bets on my fighters. Not huge money, but timed too perfectly. Like someone had information they had no business having. He showed me the numbers on his phone. 3 bets, 2 months, all on Danny. All placed a day or 2 before fight news even hit the local paper. That kind of timing does not happen by accident. Somebody was leaking from inside my own gym walls. I thought back to the gray sedan, the stranger asking about Danny at the diner. The call to the front desk asking what time I opened. Small pieces, starting to look like one picture. I already had a feeling where this was headed. I just needed the name to catch up to the feeling. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of quiet phone calls, favors called in, one dead-end conversation at a gym 3 towns over that suddenly wasn't a dead end anymore. I'm not built for sitting still with a question like that hanging over me, so I worked it the same way I'd work a fighter's weaknesses before a fight. Methodically, 1 angle at a time, never tipping my hand to anybody who didn't need to see it. I called a trainer I hadn't spoken to in 6 years and asked him, casual, who was still hanging around the local card games these days. I bought a round for a bartender near the arena who owed me a favor from a long time back and let him talk without asking him a single direct question. People tell you more when they think they're just filling silence. The man behind those bets was drowning in debt, gambling debt, a car about to get repossessed, the kind of trouble that makes a man reckless enough to reach for anything close by. I already knew he was close enough to my gym to hear things he had no business hearing. What I didn't know yet was whose husband he was. When my guy said the name out loud, I didn't flinch. I just finally understood which direction the current had been pulling from the whole time. Blake. My ex-wife's husband. Up until that second, he'd always been a stranger to me, a name without a face. Now he had both, and a very personal interest in my money on top of it. 2 days later, Rachel walked into my gym. 3 years, and she'd never once come back. Not for a fight night, not to grab something she left behind. Now she stood at my front desk in a jacket I didn't recognize, smiling like we still talked every week. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. "I heard about Danny's win." Her voice was warm, too warm, rehearsed. She asked how I was handling the money. Casual, careful, like a woman choosing every word before it left her mouth. I've known her 11 years. I know the difference between her real voice and the one she uses when she wants something, the one she used to use on landlords and loan officers back when we were young and broke, and she was better at talking people into things than I ever was. But it was her hands that gave her away, not her voice. Her smile held steady, practiced enough to pass with anyone who hadn't spent 11 years reading her. Her knuckles didn't. She had her purse strap wound tight around 2 fingers, gripping it the way you grip something on a boat in rough water, and the skin over the bone had gone pale white. She never looked at me for longer than a couple of seconds at a time. Her eyes would land, hold, then slide off toward the trophy case, the door, her phone, anywhere that wasn't my face. Her eyes went straight to the trophy case by the door. Danny's belt. She lingered there a second too long. She checked her phone twice while we talked. Quick glances, like she was waiting on a message or making sure one hadn't already come through. She asked if I still lived in the same house. I told her I did. She smiled and said it was good. Some things never change. I kept it short. Walked her to the door before it turned into something I wasn't ready for. Watching her walk to her car, I didn't feel angry yet. I felt something closer to pity, the kind you feel watching somebody perform a role they hate, badly, because somebody else is standing just off stage making sure they don't forget their lines. That night, I called Danny, not about boxing. Everybody knows Blake, he said. He said, reckless, always chasing his losses, one bad week from disaster. Then he told me something that turned my stomach. Blake liked to talk when he was drunk. Danny heard it firsthand, 2 stools down at a bar near the arena. The same night, it turned out, that Blake had also been bragging about knowing exactly what my Columbus payout was going to look like before the fight even ended, a number he had no legitimate way of knowing, and a number he'd clearly been repeating to anyone who'd buy him another round. Blake bragged that his wife owed him everything, that she'd cheated on her first husband to be with him, that she better remember that every time she thought about leaving. I sat with that for a long time. Blake wasn't just a man with bad luck at the sportsbook. He was a man holding her own guilt over her head like a leash, pulling it a little tighter every time she got close enough to the door to remember she had one. She wasn't staying because she loved him. She was staying because she was ashamed. And shame does something love never manages to do. It convinces you that leaving would be admitting you were the villain of your own story all along, not just once, but twice, once for the affair, and again for finally walking away from the man you wrecked your first marriage to be with. Shame is a heavier chain than love ever was. Part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because Blake needed money badly, and Blake had been close enough to my fighters to hear about my win before I ever told a single soul myself. And somewhere between his bragging and his debt, he'd said my name enough times that Rachel started asking her own questions. She didn't come back because she missed me. She came back because she smelled money, and because the man holding her hostage with guilt had just handed her a reason to look somewhere else. 2 days later, she called. I just want to talk, she said. Just us. No pressure. I heard a car door shut somewhere behind her voice. Close, like she wasn't calling from home. She brought up Charleston, the yellow house we almost bought, things she hadn't mentioned once in the 2 years we were actually still married. Then, gently, she asked if I could help her out. Not much, she said, just enough breathing room. She said we, like we were still a team, like the last 3 years had just been some detour we'd both agreed to take before circling back to where we started. I heard a man's voice behind hers, low, telling her to hurry up. Does Blake know you're calling me? I asked. Silence. Too long. He's dealing with some stuff, she finally said. It has nothing to do with you. That silence told me everything the last 2 weeks had been building toward. Here's the twist I never saw coming until that exact second, and it took me a full week sitting with it before I could say it out loud. She wasn't returning for old feelings buried and rediscovered. In her mind, my money and her sudden affection were the same event. There was nothing to separate. The money came first. The warmth came right behind it, timed perfectly. I'd spent weeks wondering if some part of her still cared about who I actually was. That phone call answered it for good. I didn't yell. I told her calmly I couldn't help her, that whatever she and Blake were dealing with was between the two of them now. She pushed harder, brought up our years together, said people change. I told her people do change. I'd changed plenty since the divorce, just not in the direction she was hoping for. Then I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I actually slept. I didn't go after Rachel publicly. I didn't put my hands on Blake, even the one night I stood close enough to. I'd already made a few calls before that phone call ever happened. I don't wait to be told a storm is coming. I check the sky myself. Gyms and fight circles are small. Reputation moves faster than money. I'd found out 3 things about Blake that mattered: who he owed, how much, and by when. Friday. That was his deadline. A debt he needed covered by Friday, and he was counting on one specific payout to cover it. I made sure that payout never came. One promoter I've known 15 years told me he'd already banned 2 guys that year for the exact same thing Blake was doing. He thanked me for the heads up. No questions asked. Another friend who runs a book out of his cousin's bar said he'd stopped taking Blake's action completely, effective that day. Not personal, he told me, just business. It was Wednesday night when I closed the gym and saw the gray sedan again, parked half a block down under a busted streetlight, engine off, exactly where it had been the 2 nights my neighbor mentioned it. The street was empty. No cars passing, no lights on in the buildings around it, except the one blinking sign at the laundromat on the corner. I stood in the gym doorway for a second, keys still in my hand, and thought about every quiet way I could handle this and every loud one, and settled on the only one that wouldn't cost me anything I couldn't afford to lose. I'd had enough of it sitting out there like a rumor I couldn't confront. I didn't call the police. I walked straight over, slow, unhurried, and knocked twice on the driver's side glass. The window came down an inch at a time, like he was hoping I'd change my mind before it finished. Blake looked smaller than the man Danny had described bragging at a bar. Up close, in the dark, with nowhere to talk his way out to, he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd run out of moves. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Your bets are done," I said. "By Friday, you've got nothing left standing. And if you send my wife to do your talking for you one more time, I'm going to stop being polite about any of this." I called her my wife on purpose, not because it was still true, because for 1 second I wanted him to feel exactly how much of his own life he'd built on top of somebody else's leftovers. He didn't say anything back. There wasn't anything left to say. I stepped away from the car, walked back into the gym to lock up the rest of the lights, and didn't look over my shoulder once. No shouting, no shove, no swing, nothing that would ever put my name in a police report. Just a closed door, in every sense of the word. Behind me, I heard the sedan's engine finally turn over, idle a moment too long, then pull away slow, like a man who still hadn't decided where he was driving to. By Wednesday, Blake didn't have the money. By Friday, it wasn't my problem anymore. Doors didn't close on Blake slowly. They closed on him all at once, in the same week he needed them open most. No public scene, no shouting out on the street where somebody's neighbor could film it. Nothing that could ever be pinned to my name at a police station. Just a man who ran out of road exactly when he could least afford to. A month later, Susan called again. Blake had lost everything he'd been counting on. Rachel hadn't been seen with her usual friends in weeks. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need a scoreboard. I never heard from Rachel again after that call. I never reached out either. I've replayed that last phone call more times than I'd like to admit, mostly for the sounds underneath her voice, the parts she probably didn't know were carrying through. Right before she hung up, I heard the small metal click of a lighter catching, then that particular kind of breathing a person does when they're trying to sound calm and failing, short, through the nose, deliberate. And under all of it, low enough that she probably thought it stayed in the car, Blake cursing at somebody, muffled, the words chewed down to nothing but the anger still coming through clean. That's the sound I hear some nights instead of sleep, not her voice, his. Whatever guilt kept her tied to Blake before, I imagine it still does. That's not my responsibility anymore. It never really was. These days, my mornings look exactly the way they always have. Eggs, black coffee, 20 minutes on the bag before the sun comes up. Some things a man doesn't let go of, no matter what happens around the edges of his life. She came back for the money. She left with less than she had before she walked in. That's not revenge. That's just math.